Yes, yes. Now, you just explained in a nice way how GovTech is currently organized. GovTech started in 2017 when all the different parts came together, right? From the old government CIO office from IDA, and as you've explained, it's expanded. How has the organization within GovTech changed over these past 4 years? And why has it changed? Because it would reflect lessons learned.
Yeah, when I first took over as Government Chief Information Officer in 2014, I would say maybe 85% of all the people were under services, were really embedded in the agencies. Over the years, you find that the product team has grown significantly. The product team is now more than 1,000 people, right? So you'll find that what's happened is that the growth is going in such a way whereby it becomes a more balanced organization because all three groups are very important. Yes. And the advent of the product groups since about 2015 or so reflects the fact that we are really moving away from just letting every single agencies run monolithic systems to more a platform-driven approach, to a product-driven approach, which I think reflects very much the evolution of many other organizations outside the government in the first place, if you think carefully about that. And that the combination of both are quite important.
Yes. I want to focus now within GovTech on the one sub-part of the organization, the one GovTech pillar that's involved in the development and the product creation. All right. So these are the people at GovTech central headquarters, if you will, though they might be working at home now, of course, right? And you said even that one sub-pillar is split into a few sub-organizations. How has the organization of that part of GovTech, which has grown from 7 people to over 1,000, how has that evolved over these past several years?
You know, when we first started, that small group of people was just focused on application development. And that was the kernel of GDS, which is now probably about more than 400 people, right? But you and I know that the different branches of technology are becoming more and more specialized, right? You can't just put everyone together, especially when you got more than 1,000 people, right? When you have like 200 people, it's fine. So you'll find that the logical organization of people who are application development people, software engineers, they kind of constitute what GDS is. Data science became very important, and they are really a different bunch of people. And the advent of AI especially has driven the way we organize those people. Then you'll find that the whole concept of infrastructure has changed dramatically. It used to be the past whereby infrastructure means running data centers, but that's not the case anymore. I mean, cloud is such an important part of infrastructure. And so that group kind of grew by leaps and bounds too. Then comes a very interesting part. Sensors and IoT. A lot of people think of sensors and IoT as physical things like robots and all that stuff. But the most important part of sensors and IoT is actually the software part. Because today, many of the actual devices are commodity. We buy them.
Yes.
What makes it work is really the firmware in there.
And what you do once you get the thing that the sensor is sensing.
Exactly.
Yes.
The data that comes. Now here comes the important part, right? You find that even though they are organized as 5 different capability centers, they interact a lot together. Most products or projects require more than one capability center, right? You might want this group of guys to develop software for you. So what do you do with data, right? These guys will do the data engineering for you. You might then want to use sensors to collect data, for example. The data goes back to the data science people to do the analysis, for example, which then feedbacks to the application people to build the applications for it. So you'll find that all these capability centers are intertwined.
Yes.
Even though they got very strong specialization. And that's the nature of technology today.
So these 5 capability centers you have within GovTech, where you have your own expertise, right? Application development, infrastructure, data science and AI, cyber, and sensors and IoT. Do you envision that partitioning or that type of organization to stay the same for the next 1 or 2 or 3 years? Or do you sort of have an inkling that that might even shift as the world is changing?
You know, we kind of like progress with the world. So for example, if one day you find that maybe modeling and simulation, for example, could be another big area that comes up, well, you could create another capability centers. We never know. For example, like AI by itself, if it gets big enough, it might be partitioned away from data science. So I think we are very malleable. We are willing to try, and we're going to progress together with where the rest of the world is going.
For the foreseeable future, it seems this is a sensible way to organize.
Exactly.
And just like everything else in the spirit of what this group is about, you learn by doing.
Exactly. And the thing is that the interaction between those groups are going to be very important going forward. I don't think there's one single product or project that's just going to rely on one.
Now, the things that we have talked about per the introduction and also on building the foundations, they all assume we have capable people. And there's a lot of dimensions of capability here, both the conceptual, where we want to plan, the administration, the regulation, different aspects of the technology itself. So you started this interview by saying, when you came in initially as head of the Government Chief Information Office in the old IDA, it was a different kind of capability profile. So talk to us about the trajectory in building out capabilities within the government that have made it possible to move to where you've moved.
You know, this is probably the biggest challenge of any government wanting to go digital, is to get the right people. And getting the right people is not easy. And we're not talking about just engineers, right? It's really a whole, group of people that are quite different, all the way from people who understand policy, all the way down to people who have managerial skills that are managing engineers, for example,
right,
to the real technical people, right? And in the beginning, it was very difficult for us to hire people like that, because if you're a very experienced engineer, for example, why would you join the government? Why don't you join Google or AWS or one of those, right? So there must be a reason for these people to join the government. And I think one of the key reasons that we always pitch to them is it's about purpose. I was talking to someone in Google before, and it's kind of a joke. I said, all you do is sell advertisements, right? Now, is that a great purpose in life? Not really. You make a lot of money, yeah, true, but so what, right? So many of them who join us at the end are focused on purpose.
Purpose-driven.
They are very keen to make lives of people better.
Yeah.
And they are willing to join us because they want to do projects that are very impactful for the whole country, right? That will benefit citizens, businesses, etc. And that was really how we started bringing in good people from the private sector to help.
Now, as GovTech was formed in 2017 and moved on its trajectory, to what extent was it repurposing existing people and building their capability set versus bringing in people with new capability sets?
Both are just as important. We just want to bring everyone along, right? So for existing people, we even came out with a digital academy to train people, to make sure that people are trained to take up new skills, because the world is changing, and the most important thing about relevance is learning something new, right? And so by training people, by reorganizing GovTech to create roles, different roles for people, we are able to then bring people along in this journey. But at the same time, that's not good enough. You also need to bring in another group of people who can basically help us, grow faster. And then there's a third dimension which is quite important. How do we bring in young people, fresh graduates, into the government so that they can have a pipeline of people coming into the government to really drive the change together with us? So it's not just about existing people, it's not just about new people, but the pipeline is important.
So tell us about some of the new programs that you have put in place to enable this people development.
So, for example, if you look at it, there are a couple of things, right? One is that, let's start with the pipeline. Of course, we have scholarships for many of the young people to join us. We also created a Technology Associate Program about 7 years ago. I think we are now in the 7th batch already. And the idea is to bring very, very good people from the university, fresh graduates, go through a program for 2 years with us, and then they move into the agencies or to the product groups, basically. And the idea is to really give them a very strong foundation in technology, get them to practice, get them to hone their real engineering skill in the first couple of years before we move them into their relevant jobs.
So it's a curated program where those first 2 years are designed to have some special technology depth experiences.
Exactly.
And then they'll fork out to one of the different parts of GovTech.
Right. Yeah. So and we also have a digital technology scheme whereby we really bring in very, very good top talent in technology, whereby they are placed on a scheme whereby their remuneration, etc., is commensurate with the tech industry, basically, so that the hygiene factor is settled.
Well, you just made this comment that we have people in certain technology tracks where the compensation is commensurate with, not so far from the commercial sector. That doesn't just happen by chance. Most governments struggle with that. By what policy mechanism was that issue addressed?
You know, we believe from day one that if you truly want to attract good people and sustain them, you need to fulfill the hygiene factor, right? You can't pay them at 20% of the industry. It has to be at least on the average or slightly more, right? And that's why the compensation scheme is important. Our ability to make sure that the hygiene factors are taken care of so that we can basically sustain and hold these people.
Right.
No, but Steve, you know, that doesn't mean that we will be able to compete with the Googles of the world.
No, of course, you're not going to outbid, but you just don't want the gap to be so large.
Exactly.
So if they're purpose-driven people, if it's close enough, it's good enough. But having a little bit of background about the Singapore government, things like these salary scales are often controlled centrally by the civil service. So there had to be some coordination,
of course,
between Smart Nation, Government Office, and GovTech with the part of the civil service that deals with salary schemes.
Of course.
And were there, in fact, these kind of interactions?
Of course there was.
So this is how, behind the scenes, this enablement happened.
Exactly. Yeah, and then and then what we did was that we kind of like split the career path into 3 paths. We call it technology managers, technology leaders, and technology specialists. Now, why did we break it this way? In the past, there was really no career track for a specialist, for someone who is very deep tech. Because for most civil servants, it's how big a team you run, you know, et cetera, managerial, administrative kind of stuff. Right. And that kind of let many of them fall through the cracks.
Yes.
But if you don't have a proper scheme that allows people to grow technically, if they want to, then you'll lose all these good people. So we have a scheme that's focused very much on what we call technology specialists. Then we got a scheme that's focused very much on technology leaders. People who have strong tech background that over time starts running product teams, running engineering teams, etc. We need a scheme for that also.
Right.
And then we got another track, which is called technology managers. Now, whatever you say is still the public sector. You still have to deal with policies, you still have to deal with the bureaucracy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Which means that you need a bunch of people who can understand technology enough to translate it into policies, to translate that into plans for the government that the rest of the bureaucracy can embrace.
Basically. They know how to work with the Ministry of Finance.
Correct.
They know how to work with all the different government agencies.
Correct. So you need all kinds of people to make this successful. One group alone will fail.
Yes.
Ultimately.
And within GovTech, you specifically have taken the measures to get these different career tracks.
Correct.
Was this there right at the outset in 2017 when GovTech launched as an entity?
It was before that.
Even before that?
We started doing this before that.
All right.
right? But then by the time GovTech was formed, we had a lot more structure. It got better.
So what you're saying is even in the prior IDA,
right,
this multiple tracks within the
was
technical
slowly
community.
coming together. But it's only when GovTech was formed that we really had a more institutional view of this, that we were able to get it there.
And then you've continued to
Right.
move on.
Right, and that's important.
Okay.